time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Joan, as always, exceptional work from you from, your TV days all the way up to today. You're truly exceptional, and thanks for this great show you have.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hello and welcome to Bad Attitude Tuesday. It is July 7th, and like most Tuesdays, I have a terrible attitude. Tuesday is a hard day for all of us, I think. As I've said before, Monday, you're still kind of in a weekend haze. But Tuesday, man, you are back at it, and you are looking at the whole rest of the week ahead of you. Hence, Bad Attitude Tuesday. It is, there's nothing huge going on right now as of this moment. A lot of medium to small news stories. Let's start with Graham Plattner. He won the Democratic nomination in Maine to run for Senate. He has had controversies about things that he has said before, a tattoo that was described as a Nazi tattoo. He seemingly overcame all of that. He had a lot of endorsements. But now a woman who he dated off and on for a couple of years has come out and described in detail an incident where he asked to come over. She said no. She heard him coming up the stairs. She had left the front door unlocked. And he wanted to have sex with her. She didn't want to. She says that she repeatedly told him no, no, no. But she said she smelled alcohol on him. And against her will, he had sex with her. He first, when this came out, he denied it. But he has been rapidly losing support and endorsements. He lost a veterans group endorsement. Most recently, he lost Bernie Sanders' endorsement. Bernie Sanders saying, "I've spoken with Graham Plattner about the best path forward for Maine. In light of these very serious allegations, I have recommended that he step aside." Zoran Mamdani said that the only appropriate response was to end his campaign. Chuck Schumer, Kirsten Gillibrand, Maine's state party leadership, Elizabeth Warren, Ruben Gallego, Ro Khanna, have also come out and said that he needs to step aside. To replace him with another Democrat on the ballot, he would have to withdraw from the race by this coming Monday, July 13th. If he withdraws by July 13th, he can be replaced on the ballot. If he does not withdraw from the race, by then he will be on the ballot and he will be the Democratic nominee. So we will see. There is starting to be a real tidal wave of folks. I wondered if this charge was legitimate. I wondered why this woman would have waited so long to step forward, but apparently she had stepped forward previously. She had accused him of sexual assault, but didn't want to say the word rape because she said she did not want to be seen as a rape victim. When another woman accused Graham Plattner of being sexually inappropriate, she felt that for that woman to be taken seriously, there needed to be more than one voice, and that is why she has gone public. Democrats are already talking about who would replace him. I don't think it will be Janet Mills. Janet Mills, while she may have been and continue to be beloved by the people of Maine, may have been a great governor for them, she did really poorly in the primary. And, you know, one of the big arguments against Susan Collins was this whole let's turn governing over to a new generation. And Janet Mills is actually older than Susan Collins. And while I think ageism is not a good thing, the pragmatic fact of this upcoming midterm election is that there is an anti-incumbent wave and an anti, if you've been there forever, if you're older, step aside wave. I don't think Janet Mills will be the party's choice, partly because of her age, but also she went up against Graham Plattner and she was crushed by him. That is not a woman who is a strong candidate. There have been some other names who have been floated. There was another Democrat who was trying to run in the primary but dropped out. But I'm sure that the Maine Democratic Party is considering all this, is weighing all this. They've essentially already told Graham Plattner, look, if you don't drop out, we're just telling you right now, there will be no money from us for your campaign. So we shall see. Today is the 7th. Basically, Graham Plattner would have to drop out no later than this coming Monday to be replaced on the ballot. I suspect that he will. He has been very adamant, I guess it doesn't need the word very. He has been adamant answering his critics for all the other stuff, saying, you know, don't judge me by what I did as a young man. He has already admitted that he had a real problem with alcohol after he got back from the military, also a big problem with PTSD. But instead of, you know, fighting, he has said that he's going to sit down and think about it. So it doesn't seem like this is something that he wants to fight. So we will see what happens. My guess is that before this week is out, I don't think he'll wait till the last minute. I think maybe as early as today, but certainly in a couple of days, he is going to make the announcement that he has decided, for the good of his family and the good of his own mental health, that he is withdrawing from the race. So that's one of the things we're going to be keeping an eye on. The other thing we're going to be keeping an eye on is this meeting, this NATO summit starts today. Trump is already in Turkey. Donald Trump is there. God help us. You know, he did an interview from the White House talking about Iran, refused to call it a war, called it a military conflict. But one thing that was obvious, and this has been pointed out repeatedly, he apparently has developed a real trouble swallowing, which is a symptom of many of the things that he has been believed to have right now, any of the medical problems. His mouth fills up with saliva, and you can hear it when he talks. It's almost like you expect him to spray when he talks. But he is in Turkey, walked up the red carpet all by himself, and I'm sure he's going to be there to cause trouble. He's already, I told you before, don't think that Greenland is off the table. He's talking about Greenland again. It doesn't make any sense for Greenland to be a part of Denmark. It only makes sense for Greenland to be overseen by the United States. I don't know. You would think that his experience in Iran would have satisfied his desire to wage a military campaign somewhere. And if he does, God help us. If he does make a move against Greenland, that's going to tear the world apart. He will be attacking a NATO ally. And it isn't just Denmark that has been, it's not only the country of Denmark holding military exercises in Greenland, but many European countries have been joining Denmark to do these exercises, military exercises. They just happen to be in Greenland. Will we fire on them? I mean, they're not going to just hand Greenland over. Oh, he's threatening us. Let's just write up a new contract where Greenland belongs to him. No. If he wants Greenland, there is going to have to be some sort of military threat. And if there is a military threat against another member of NATO, then NATO basically falls apart. And not only will our enemies see a weakened United States, but so will our allies. In this world today, as interconnected as we are, you need allies. You need people on your side. You need people who will back you up in a crisis. You know, like NATO did after 9/11, the only time NATO has been called upon to defend one of its members was us after 9/11. He talks like somehow, you know, we can't count on NATO to be there for us. Well, they were, they did, they have. Let's hope that our military, who apparently raised the possibility with Donald Trump that Iran would close down the Strait of Hormuz, and Trump didn't believe it would happen. He believed it was going to be like the Maduro thing. You know, one quick strike and Iran was going to crumble. And by pretty much everybody's account, he has only succeeded in making Iran a more dangerous enemy. He's succeeded in making Iran a more solid power. He has shown Iran what they can do if they have to. The military, if Donald Trump goes to the military and says, I want to attack Greenland, I mean, until the midterms, the Congress isn't going to stop him. The Supreme Court can't be counted on to stop him. Until the midterms and Democrats regain some measure of power, if he wants to take military action against Greenland, I don't know who else could stop him but the military. So if we ever hear that a number of the Joint Chiefs have suddenly all decided at once to resign, alarm bells better go off. Hegseth is an idiot. He's a moron. He's not going to do anything. Bob from by the way, the phone lines and the text lines are open. 773-763-9278, 773 WCPT. If you are a first-time caller, that's the easiest way to remember the number. Bob from Elgin texted in, Traitor-in-Chief is on about Greenland again? They have to get this maniac out of office. Also, did you see he was talking to the press, and he was talking about the great, great person, the wonderful person, the fabulous person who was head of the Small Business Administration, Nicki Minaj. Yeah, that Nicki Minaj, she's doing a great job with the Small Business Association. And you know it's not really small. Huh. Kelly Loeffler, the would-be Republican senator from Georgia, who was appointed to a seat and then couldn't hang on to it during an election. She's the head of the Small Business Administration. Kelly Loeffler, tall, slim, long blonde hair, couldn't look more different than Nicki Minaj. What some people are thinking, apparently, I don't know where he was making these comments, but apparently Nicki Minaj was in the audience. And people are wondering, well, did he want to talk about the Small Business Administration, but he saw Nicki Minaj in the audience and somehow he put her name into what he was saying? Yeah, the Small Business Administration is run so beautifully. Such a great job is being done with the Small Business Administration. Really have to hand it to Nicki Minaj, how she is managing that agency. Nicki Minaj, yep. Okie dokie. I can't imagine Kelly Loeffler was very happy about that. Frankly, I can't imagine that Nicki Minaj was very happy about that. I mean, she has gone all in on Trump. And then he says something that is as off the rails as that. Okay. All right. Don't stay there. Interesting. I've seen a couple of conflicting reports about ICE. There was a report in the media. You know how ICE started buying all those big warehouses because they were going to fill them up with peoples? Well, apparently they are trying to get rid of some of those warehouses. Why? They have been thwarted in the courts. You know, the courts made them shut down Alligator Alley. Maybe they don't think there's going to be hundreds of thousands of illegals. Maybe they no longer believe that. So it has been reported that they are trying to sell. They're trying to unload. They've bought like 11 or 12 of these huge warehouses, and most of them are back on the market again. So there's that. That's good news. But very quietly, and apparently so far without killing anybody, ICE has continued to grab people. By the way, did you see where the governor of Connecticut signed a bill that requires federal agents to have their names and badge numbers clearly on display and that they are not allowed to cover their faces? Governor of Connecticut has signed it into law. But ICE is continuing to grab people in increasing numbers. Ro Khanna recently was talking about this. He is, of course, the Democratic congressman whose name you might recall because he and Thomas Massie insisted that the Epstein files be released. Yeah, that hasn't happened either. But Ro Khanna was talking about ICE and how they are still taking in thousands of people. Maybe they're just doing it more quietly now because, you know, they're not shooting anybody. Listen to what Ro Khanna had to say.
ICE has increased detentions from 1,000 a day to 2,000 a day. Just last week, there were over 10,000 detentions. Now, I know ICE hasn't been as much in the news lately. After the Alex Preddy killing and the Renee Good killing and the siege in Minneapolis and Los Angeles, many people were outraged at ICE. But we cannot ignore their continued abuse. These people being detained are being denied basic human rights. I was at the California City Detention Center. I saw someone with blood in his urine who was denied medical care. I saw rocks in the food. I saw people shivering because they didn't have clothes. We need to abolish ICE and replace it. We need to stop funding ICE that's violating human rights.
And, ICE is a relatively recent creation. If you're a grown-up, for most of your life, there was no ICE. It is a fairly recent creation, though with the governments, once things are established, it's more difficult to get rid of them than if something is simply being considered. But the calls to get rid of ICE, it's not just the far left anymore. When we see these Gestapo-like enforcers who wear masks and have no identification and show up in unmarked vans to grab people, what does that say to you? Does that say the United States of America? It doesn't say that to me. We have Border Patrol, Customs and Border Patrol. Hello. Isn't illegal immigration their job? And I remember a 60 Minutes piece before Donald Trump got back into office where they looked at ICE, and this 60 Minutes reporter was allowed to go with an early morning ICE raid, and the ICE agent in charge, who, by the way, none of them were wearing masks. All of them had their identification front and center before Trump. And they had a warrant for somebody. So they went to this place, or they pulled over a van where that guy and a couple of other people were being taken to a job. And they grabbed the guy they had the warrant for. And they found out the guy who was driving the van was also undocumented, didn't have papers. And the reporter said, "Aren't you going to take this person too?" And the guy who was in charge of that raid said, "No, we don't have a warrant for that guy. So no, we're not going to bring in somebody we don't have a warrant for. We have a warrant for this guy. This is the guy we're bringing in." And then there was Stephen Miller, who changed everything. Stephen Miller, who apparently in a long ago White House conversation in a hallway was screaming at the person who was head of ICE, telling them that they need to be bringing in 3,000 people a day. And, the guy was saying, look, we're supposed to be bringing in criminals, and it takes a while to make sure somebody has broken the law. And Stephen Miller basically said, we don't care about that. We don't care about that. Just round them up in mass numbers. And that's when ICE changed. We have callers. We have more texters. I'm going to take a break and get to that in a second.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
We are taking your calls and reading your texts about the Democratic primary for the open Senate, the competition for the Senate seat in Maine. Susan Collins is in that seat right now. Somebody texted in that Stephen King should run. The horror author famously lives in Maine. The only problem is he's 78 years old. I think he would be wildly popular. And if there's a 78-year-old who could pull it off, it probably would be him. But I don't think you're going to convince him that is a good retirement job for him. I think he's successful enough that he's not going to want to jump into that snake pit. Somebody else texted in, so we witnessed another MAGA hypocrite, Caroline Leavitt, berate and call various young people entitled, lazy, and with no work ethic. Yet she has no self-awareness of her background. She married a billionaire, 30 years her senior. Meanwhile, the pedophile in chief is at the NATO summit wasting our money and embarrassing us again. No words on Epstein, unlike when he was on the campaign trail. By the way, remember I told you Katie Fang and an activist group went to court to say to the judge, hey, Congress passed this law. Todd Blanche hasn't released all the unredacted files. And the judge was like, you know what, Katie Fang and this activist group, you are correct. And Todd Blanche has until July 2nd to tell me when they're going to release it or tell me a good reason why they can't. Well, I know you're not going to be shocked. Todd Blanche went to court and said, we can't do it. The judge, in response to that, went back to Katie Fang and said, okay, you have until July 13th to counter his argument. And then after, this is the legal system we have, God love us, after Katie and her group files the reason why Todd is wrong, Todd and the DOJ get one more chance to reply. So what we hoped might happen by the beginning of July, we will be very lucky if it happens by the end of July. But the wheels are still turning, okay? The wheels are still turning. Let's go to the phone lines. Greg from Lake in the Hills is on the line. Hey, Greg, how are you? Paul, I can't hear Greg. Is he there? Hi, Greg. How are you today?
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay, great. Yeah, the reason,
Can't hear Greg. Is he there? Yeah, I'm here.
Hello?
I'm here. Can you hear me, Greg?
I can hear you on the radio, yep.
Oh, well, yes, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry, something got messed up there on my end, I'm sure. The reason I'm calling today, the first comment is, the three guys who attacked the WGN or Channel 2 reporter, I think it was, in Chicago recently.
Uh-huh.
I just wonder if any of those met the qualifications set by Brett Kavanaugh. You basically, if they look like, they're illegals, why isn't ICE involved, going after these guys?
Well,
they all look like, look quotations, using his criteria, I would have thought these three guys would be in El Salvador by now,
yeah,
or someplace else.
Well, Brett Kavanaugh said, we can judge. It's perfectly reasonable for ICE to go after people who are brown. Of course, that's not profiling. That's just common sense, right?
Exactly, and like I said, I'm being kind of facetious because I don't subscribe to that, of course. Okay, but it's a little bit of a segue. I'm getting good at this, eh? A little segue into my next comment, and that is that there's that old line that I've always heard about. It depends on whose ox is getting gored, and the way I see it, and this is regarding the Graham Plattner situation where the lady who he supposedly raped, from her perspective. I have no knowledge, so I have to go by what she's saying. But, here we are where, the guy who we just were talking about, Brett Kavanaugh, there was a Catherine Blasey Ford. Now, so whose ox is it? Whose ox?
And not only Blasey Ford had some bad things to say about Kavanaugh, but it revealed later that she wasn't the only one, that there were a number of women who had inappropriate sexual comments to make about Brett Kavanaugh and the way he interacted with them, and the FBI didn't investigate them. I wonder why. I wonder whose order that was.
I'm glad you brought that last part up because that's exactly right. And, it's why I say whose ox is getting gored. Perhaps this the lady who's exposing Graham Plattner at this late date after he won the election, maybe she's got somebody paying her. I don't know.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I said that I was reading about this, to find out why she didn't come forward sooner. And from everything I read, she did let people know that he had sexually assaulted her, and she had filed a complaint, but she said she didn't want to accuse him of rape because she didn't want to be known as a rape victim. So it isn't, because that was, Greg, I have to say that, I always wondered if this was the case, if this happened, why did she wait till now to speak up? But she claims that she did tell people and she did let people know. She just felt that, and she even said, this was, I thought, really weird, that she supports his politics. She just doesn't think he's a good human being. So she's not even saying, I'm doing this so that he won't become a senator. She's like, no, I agree with his politics. I just don't like him as a person. Okay. All right. Okay.
I agree with that, and I watched all the interviews. I watched the shortened one, then I watched the full one. I think it was with a guy on CNN later.
She talked to Jake Tapper, I think.
Yeah, so I watched that. But here's my last take on this. I think Plattner should, make consideration of leaving the Senate race contingent on a couple of things. One, official receipt of the $5.8 million by E. Jean Carroll. Saying, in other words, here's a contingency. If this happens, then I will consider leaving of the race. Official receipt of the additional $83.3 million by E. Jean Carroll. In other words, it's in her hand, both of these items. And then formal denunciation and a statement of concern from Susan Collins about the sexual assault of E. Jean Carroll from Susan Collins. And the final part of this is a formal chastisement and statement of concern by current Maine Senator Susan Collins of the acting Attorney General Todd Blanche for his refusal to release unredacted copies of all Jeffrey Epstein / Donald J. Trump's sex trafficking files. And once all of these are complied with, he should have another list of demands. Yeah.
And, there are a lot of ways that Susan Collins could really put herself in a better light. I don't think it's going to happen, though. I think she has lost her way, and I don't know who's advising her campaign, but it should be you, Greg.
She's terrible. She's terrible. Yeah. It's anyway. I'm going to clear off like Dave from Hoffman Estates always says. Yeah. I'm talking way too long. Thank you for taking my call.
Greg. Thanks for the call. I got a text from Bob in Gurnee talking about Republicans. A functioning body and mind are not necessary to be a Republican. Look at Mitch McConnell and the president. Yes. By the way, Scott Jennings, who is the guy who always goes on CNN and lies all the time and doesn't often get challenged by the hosts. That's Scott Jennings. He used to work with Mitch McConnell, and he posted on social media, I spoke to my old friend Mitch McConnell this morning, the senior senator from Kentucky. He's still recovering in the hospital. We talked for just shy of 20 minutes about Iran, Ukraine, the unfolding situation in Maine, my visit to the Teddy Roosevelt Presidential Library, and even a little bit of Senate history. I told him we want to see him back at work as soon as possible. So the rumors that he is dead or on life support, according to Scott Jennings, they are not true. Not true. Okay. Let's go to Ron, who's on the line from Chicago. Hey, Ron.
Yes, Laurie Loomer said today that Mitch McConnell is brain dead. So
I saw that, too, where supposedly Laura Loomer posted on social media that Mitch McConnell was on life support and basically brain dead. So maybe that's why Scott Jennings did what he did. And you know what? We're going to find out sooner or later. We are eventually going to find out what happened to Mitch McConnell and what the ensuing days were like for Mitch McConnell. And if it turns out that he was unconscious the whole time, we'll just rack up another lie for Scott Jennings.
Yeah. And today Trump said that he wants to sell Turkey fighter jets, but he won't he won't give Ukraine any military aid, even though.
No, and Dana Bash from CNN did an interview with Benjamin Netanyahu, and Benjamin Netanyahu is not pleased about that alleged sale of the F-35s to Turkey. And he was like, he was trying to kind of thread the needle, like I really like Donald Trump, but he's got to realize that Turkey is not his friend. So we'll see.
Yeah. And on Saturday, the fireworks display lasted 40 minutes, and it cost $90 million.
And did you read where there was such a cloud left after the fireworks in Washington, D.C., that it was the worst air quality of any city in the United States?
Yeah, that's what they said today. They said today it's code red air quality in Washington, D.C., and the worst in the world. The worst in the world. Okay. And, okay, thank you much. All right.
Thanks so much.
All right.
Let us go back to the phone lines. Chi-Town Dave is on the line. Hi, Dave.
Hey, yes, good afternoon, folks. And I got a bad attitude today, especially I've always had a bad attitude towards the GOP, grand old pedophile party, and I've got even a worse attitude today. And I heard something, speaking of the GOP, there was a blind woman who called into the show one time, and she said that Steve Miller said that he wanted all disabled people to be mandatory institutionalized.
Well, what Stephen Miller is apparently trying to get the White House to do is he doesn't believe there should be any accommodations for people with disabilities. There shouldn't be, as a matter of fact, there shouldn't be special education classes. They want to undo all of that. So if you're somebody who's in a wheelchair, if you go up to, especially to a public building, there has to be a ramp. If there are stairs, there has to be a ramp so that you can enter the building. Stephen Miller wants to do away with all that. He wants to do away with all of the protections that disabled people have in the United States because he is a fine human being.
Yeah, what is his rationale for all that?
I don't know. He hates everybody and everything.
Well, I hate him. I hate Stephen Miller. I hate all the MAGAs. And, of course, Donald Trump is at the head of all this. For any Republicans listening, I hate you, too. I'm going to tell you that right now. I hate you, too.
Well, you're an equal opportunity hater.
I hate all Republicans. They're all evil, each and every one of them. Each and every one of them. All you Republicans listening, I hate you, too. And I know that you hate me. I'm blind. I know that you hate me. And you hate Paul, and you hate every blind person as well. And I hate all of you with a passion.
All righty. Dave, I understand where you're coming from here. Thank you for the call. We haven't talked in a while. I want to go back to the phone lines. Ron is on the line from Chicago. Hey, Ron. Oh, okay. Let's go to Jim, who's on the line from Chicago. Ron, you can call back.
Hey, Joan. Great callers today. Brains, that is the optimum word today. The Republican Party denies climate science. They deny human rights. I mean, I'm with Shakedown guy. I mean, these Republicans are, I mean, my whole lifetime, human rights, think about human rights. Look at Cuba. We have no reason to starve Cuba to death. We have no reason on earth to starve Cuba to death. We have no reason to shoot people in boats that are innocent, even if they were drug dealers, Joan. As we do blow up drug dealers. I mean, come on. I mean, this is no process. These poor immigrants are getting picked up. No volition for their lives or their rights or where they're going to go or how they're going to live. You know, it's just insane. What about Paxton down there talking about a guy with baggage? What about Paxton down in Texas. Can you get any more baggage than that? He's a thief. I think he's another lunatic that's involved that doesn't know how to behave himself with the opposite sex. I mean, these people I get a kick out of these. What's wrong with these buggers? But anyway, it's just I don't know what we're going to do just to pass this. Look at the guy in the pool. They got that guy. Trump says years in jail for the Olympian that supposedly ripped up the pool. Well, his lawyer was on last night on Democracy Now, and he said, and he worked in the Obama administration. He said, this guy's so innocent, forget about it. He didn't do anything. But Trump's going to put him in jail for 10 years, and not that he got down and walked.
I can't believe that prosecution will go through. I really don't. I mean, Trump is clearly doing it because he's so embarrassed about this mess that his buddy made of the reflecting pool, and rightly so. He should be embarrassed. It's a mess. But I think this is one of those things the judge is going to take a look at this and say, nope, not happening. Goodbye.
I know, but what satisfaction do you get putting an innocent person in jail or putting these people in prison? I don't know how they can conscience it. I don't know how they can do that. What is Trump care? He's already stole $2 billion, and probably by the time he's done, he'll be the all-time record on earth for stealing. And what does he care? And on top of it, he wants to make people suffer in prison, but he's the one that belongs there? Too sweet?
Yep.
Anyway, Joan, great callers today. Thank you, Joan. Thank you much.
Thank you, Jim. We are going to take a real quick break. We will be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Monday through Thursday, the first hour of the show, we read your texts and take your calls. Let us go back to the phone lines to Des Plaines, Illinois, where Steve is on the line. Hi, Steve. Thanks for the call today.
Hey, Joan. I am my attitude is gnarly and aggravated and moody. I'm sweating. I'm scratchy for the way Trump painted our 4th of July 250-year anniversary. I'm got a bad attitude about that. But let me go on to something. And I'm probably going to step on some toes here. This thing with Grant Plattner. I think we need to let the people of Maine determine this. Okay, if they still want him, let him redeem himself going forward in his life. He was a veteran, and I don't know. It's like we're in a nice fight
that
here.
is a very legitimate argument that we're all looking from our vantage point, which is not Maine. And he's running in Maine, and
that's right.
You're absolutely right. I mean, he maybe, since he has apparently lost a lot of his endorsements, maybe he's talking to people behind the scenes. Maybe he's talking to people in Maine and saying, what do you think? What do you think? Do you still think I still have a chance? Do you think I can come back from this or explain this? I would imagine that's what he's doing right now. So I guess we'll see, huh?
I would think. I don't know. It's like we are in the fight of our lives. Okay, come November, this is a street fight. We need to pull all the stops. The man he's been kind of forthwith with his issues. I mean, he was a veteran, a combat veteran. Gosh, it's like when what's his face in Minnesota got kicked out for a very sophomoric move. The Minnesota senator, Al Franken.
Al Franken.
Yeah, and it's like, oh my God, they talk about the pearl clutching. I just let him. Maybe he'll come out and say something, and he'll go like, you know what? Let me know. Give me feedback. But it's like. And I'll if I'm still elected or if I'm still in it and I can be a new man. I mean redemption is possible, and he was a vet, so I give him slack. So anyway, thank you, Joni.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for the call. I appreciate that. Let's see, where was that text I wanted to read? I seem to have clicked away from it. Somebody texted in, will ICE disappear when Trump leaves office? I don't know. Like I said, once once a bureaucracy is created, we seem to have an awful difficult time getting rid of it. So we'll just have to wait and see about that. By the way, one thing that I wanted to mention in the first half hour that I didn't get to, our former Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel is going to be giving a speech tomorrow in Israel at Tel Aviv University. You know, Benjamin Netanyahu and Rahm Emanuel don't like each other at all, at all. Benjamin Netanyahu called Rahm Emanuel a self-hating Jew. Okay. The draft, what was described as a near final draft of the speech that Rahm Emanuel is going to make, was shared with Politico. And Rahm Emanuel is going to say some difficult things about Israel and its relationship with the United States. And, you know, he is going to say that Israel is now rich enough that it doesn't need U.S. subsidies for the military munitions and things. So they're rich enough they should do this on their own. He also is apparently prepared to say that there should be sanctions against people who participate in violence against Palestinian civilians or property, and against companies and banks who support building in Israeli settlements in occupied areas of the West Bank. Basically, he's saying there needs to be a Palestinian solution to a long-term peace plan, and that as long as there is no Palestinian solution, a two-state solution, there will never be peace. So we will see. I will try to, I don't know what time the speech will be our time, but if at all possible, I'm going to try to grab some clips from it, because this is very interesting. Politico actually summarizes by saying that, here's how they end their article. Netanyahu is a useful foil and a potential bridge between two pillars. Emanuel can accurately tell younger Democrats, trust me, I've been at this fight longer than you have, and I have the enemies to show for it. Okay. All righty. Politico acknowledges that the more left-leaning parts of the Democratic Party are not big Emanuel fans, and, you know, maybe this speech will, as they said, build a bridge. We're going to take a break for news. We will be back with more right after this.
Don't turn that dial.
A dangerous mistake to make.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now on WCPT 820.
We are welcoming back Peter Giangreco, who is a longtime principal at the Strategy Group, a progressive group that advises Democratic candidates up and down the ballot. Peter, how have you been? Are you still in semi-retirement, or are you full-blown now?
No, I'm still. I can't help myself. Working for Roy Cooper in North Carolina, and
okay.
Amy Klobuchar running for governor in Minnesota, and a couple other little things. But yeah.
By the way, in the interest of full disclosure, I should say that while I respect Peter Giangreco's political knowledge, he has horrible taste in college football. That's all I'm going to say about it. So just don't go to him for any college football recommendations, because he will just steer you wrong every single time.
You know, okay. Joan, I think we can come together on this, because the last three national champions are from the Big Ten, the greatest football conference in America. Forget the SEC. They're trash.
Okay, I'll grant you that. Peter, you have advised clients, I'm sure, in many different situations. I don't know if you were able to hear some of the callers and some of the texts I read earlier today, but my audience, which tends to be, pretty progressive, they're unsure of what should happen with Graham Plattner. some people, remember, it was believed that we didn't give Al Franken the time to do an investigation and get a result, although we are very close to being out of time to replace Plattner on the ballot. Virtually everybody who endorsed him has backed away. Virtually every Democrat that I've read about is saying, he should get out of the race. But, some people are saying, why don't we let the people of Maine decide? When you have a candidate that's faced with this kind of a situation, what should they do? What would you advise?
I'd advise Graham Plattner to get out of the race because the race in Maine is more important than one person. And it's also not just a Maine issue, right? We've seen what the Supreme Court has done over the last few weeks and over the last few years, to take away, women's health care, to destroy our democracy, to do all the things that the Supreme Court has done. And that happens when you don't control the U.S. Senate. So the stakes are way too high to be thinking about one man. And, this is not one allegation from one person. It's a Nazi tattoo. It's several women. It's a guy who's not fit to serve. And I think he should be seeking treatment, not seeking a U.S. Senate seat. So I think it's that clear. And we can't allow Donald Trump to have a compliant U.S. Senate for 2 more years and stack the court with 2 more younger Supreme Court justices to replace Alito and Thomas. I don't think it's any more complicated than that.
From what I've read, Plattner has until this coming Monday to remove himself from the race and another name submitted on the ballot in his stead. But, he really kind of wiped the floor with Janet Mills. She doesn't seem to me like she would be the one to save that seat, if that's what we're talking about. So where do we find the replacement?
Well, I think there's several ideas that the Maine Democratic Party is going through, and I think they saw that a smoke-filled back room isn't the way to do it. We didn't really, as a party, have a choice because of the legal pressures and the convention and everything else. With Kamala Harris, there really wasn't time to do it right. But if Graham Plattner puts his country before himself, which he did when he was in the military, and I respect his service, then it gives Maine Democrats 2 weeks to do something, and they may bring together a convention. They may try to find a way, a small d Democratic way, to find a replacement. And honestly, a generic Democrat in any polling right now beats Susan Collins. So you don't think it's a worry that if they find a name, like there was one guy whose name escapes me right now, who initially threw his hat in the ring and then withdrew, apparently didn't feel like his campaign had gotten off the ground. But if they put somebody on at the last minute, what do you do about name recognition? How do the voters know who this person is? Or are you saying that doesn't matter? I think the race, instead of the race being about Graham Plattner, which is a losing bet for not just Maine, but for our party and for our country, the race goes back to being about Susan Collins. And that's a race we can win. The only way Susan Collins, I think, was going to win was to face someone who's easy to attack. And, we went through this in Wisconsin in 2022. Our party, driven by a lot of folks in the progressive side of the party, nominated Mandela Barnes, who was very, very easy to attack for the other side. And you had a situation where Democrats won up and down the ballot. Governor Evers won by 3 points, which in Wisconsin is a landslide. And we lost the Senate seat because we fell in love with somebody who was an opposition researcher's dream. And that's the same thing that's happening with Plattner. You're now seeing this in Pennsylvania with Fetterman, who was the darling of the left. And then I don't know what he is now, but he's not much of a Democrat anymore.
No, absolutely not.
We gotta, as a party, stop being an id complex that just says, I want, and falls in love with whoever screams the loudest, and be a little more thoughtful about who our nominees are.
But now, just correct me if I'm wrong. Fetterman still has a while to go.
He's up in 28, but
yeah.
I'm hopeful that he decides not to run. I think he's got. Not unlike Plattner, he's got a different set of mental health issues, but it feels like he needs to go take care of himself. I'm not sure being a U.S. senator is great for John Fetterman, and I don't think it's great for the party. I don't think it's great for Pennsylvania. I don't think it's great for the country. So, it's kind of a similar situation here. You fall in love with somebody who's a character and got tattoos and, tells it like it is, which sounds a lot like Trump, doesn't it? And then you have buyer's remorse. And we certainly have remorse as a party with Fetterman, who's voting with the Republicans on the war in Iran, which I just cannot get my brain around. Yeah. And we have buyer's remorse with Graham Plattner. And I think it's just like, I don't know how I get it, right? Like 11 of the last 13 federal elections have been change elections because the economy doesn't work for anybody anymore. And so you want to hit change, and you want to burn it all down. You want somebody who just screams and yells and speaks to people's economic frustration. Yeah. But we've got to be a little more sophisticated than that, because then you end up with a John Fetterman or a Graham Plattner, and you're sitting there going, how did we get in this mess?
Well, Graham Plattner is who he is. I really think that Fetterman changed radically his behavior and his way of thinking after he had that stroke. When do you have somebody's chief of staff going on record in a national forum saying this guy has issues, he's not safe, he's not safe with, he might injure himself, he might injure other people, something's got to be done. I mean, I don't think the John Fetterman we have now is the John Fetterman who was elected. But
the parallels with Plattner are really clear. A charismatic guy, Fetterman was a charismatic guy, somebody who spoke from the heart, was very authentic, full stop. Also, probably not the right choice when you look at it, because there's just some personal instability that these elections are way too high stakes to just fall in love with somebody who wants to burn down the house and screams the loudest. It speaks to people's frustration with the establishment of our party and how our economy works and just about everything else, where people who, work for a living, no matter how hard they work, they can't get ahead and they get screwed at every. Of course, people are angry, but just voting for the angriest guy out there is not a great way to pick nominees.
Yeah.
And yet we kind of have these folks foisted on us. And our next question is going to be what's going to happen in Michigan.
Oh, hold that thought, because we have to take a break. I'm talking with Peter Giangreco from the Strategy Group. He's a longtime political advisor. We are going to take a break and be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by Peter Giangreco, a longtime political candidate advisor. I interrupted him just as he was ready to talk about Michigan. And I don't know which race you wanted to talk about, but I will say in the Senate, the run for the Senate primary, I was surprised that Mallory McMorrow, the outspoken, beloved state legislator, I'm surprised she didn't do better. Were you surprised by that?
I was. And, I live in Michigan. I vote in Michigan, and I really McMorrow wasn't a client, or she was just who I was going to vote for. And I feel like, now I'm now stuck with a choice between Haley Stevens, who, where she comes from in the AIPAC world, I'm not real comfortable with, and El Said, who I think is just really easy for the Republicans to beat.
Really?
And again, there's
because he's the progressive darling.
Yes, and because he fits this complex we want to have of someone who will scream the loudest and hang out with Hassan Piker, and the answer to the problem that this country has with Islamophobia, which is huge, by the way, is not to become anti-Semitic. And yet, you hang around with Hassan Piker, you're going to be accused of that, and rightfully so. So we now have, I think you got a lot of Democrats in Michigan who are like, these are our choices. And it was, Mallory McMorrow calling out El Said, campaigning with Piker, it was part of her downfall. So it's just, I think we have to look at ourselves as a party and, be thoughtful about the folks that we nominate, because I think McMorrow would have been our best candidate. But
why didn't she catch fire?
There's this id complex in our primary, where in our electorate, we're so mad about Trump and we're so angry about the economy that we just want angry, loud people. And guess what? Angry, loud people with a lot of statements in their past or things they've done in the past that are questionable are not great candidates.
So you think that was what did her in, that she wasn't, well, we saw that, frankly, I think in Illinois. We did, WCPT did one of the Senate forums, and we had Robin Kelly, Raja Krishnamurthy, and Juliana Stratton. And clearly Juliana Stratton came out swinging. I mean, abolish ICE and Medicare for all and no corporate money. And she was exactly what you described. She was the angry voice. And while everybody thought Raja had it sewn up, that was not the case. People chose Juliana Stratton.
Yeah, and I think that's fine in a blue state like Illinois, where it didn't matter. Any one of the three of those candidates would win and would be decent U.S. senators. This is not the case if you live in Maine or Michigan or Minnesota or North Carolina or, in these swing states, Nevada. You got to be careful to not just fall in love with somebody who screams the loudest and wants to burn everything down, because they tend to be easy for the Republicans to beat. And it's, I look at somebody like James Tallarico, who I went and saw, was in Chicago a couple of weeks ago. Wow, there's the real deal. And he's got thousands more volunteers than Graham Plattner has, and Plattner had a lot, because he speaks to the anger and the frustration and the division in a way that's very uniting and very inspiring. I mean, sort of Obama-esque, I would think, in that way, and brings people together and gets people fired up. The way somebody like Mandami is. I mean, here's Mandami, who, progressives fell in love with, but he was able to say, I'm not just that. Mm-hmm. I'm all these other things too. And he's governed, starting with keeping the police commissioner Tisch in place, where I think for New Yorkers who are not progressive are looking at him and saying, okay, I want this guy to succeed. Mm-hmm. And I think, you look at Mandami, you look at Tallarico. I was hoping McMorrow, as those are people who are the future of the party. Two of the three of them, are successful, and McMorrow is, it's disappointing that she didn't do better. So, I just feel like we as a party, which is, next to impossible to do when you have the fragmentation of media and people get their news from all over the place. It's really hard to have any kind of sort of disciplined process. But we certainly need to do a better job of vetting our candidates. To me, I don't understand how a Nazi tattoo was not disqualifying for Plattner from the beginning. Mm-hmm. So, like, sometimes what it looks like is what it is. And with Plattner, it's like, this is a really interesting, really authentic, really inspiring guy who is also really, really deeply flawed. And it turns out he's a rapist. So, like, there's corroboration. If you read the Politico story from the gentleman who Rasko dated after Plattner, verified everything she said. And so this is not just one person. And frankly, she's a hero for stepping out. She didn't have to do this. But unlike, she at great cost to herself, I'm sure. I'm sure she's gotten threats and horrible things said about her on social media. But, I mean, that's real courage.
Peter, I wanted to talk to you about the candidates. You mentioned earlier that you thought Mandela Barnes was a candidate that was really easy for the other side to take apart. You are the only person, other than me, who I have heard say that Mandela Barnes wasn't a good candidate. Whenever I say that, I'm always told, like, especially people in Wisconsin, well, he nearly won. He won all these different districts, and if just this one thing would have happened, he would have won it all. So then I kind of just shut up and don't say anything anymore. But I always thought he was not the strongest candidate. And you want to talk about, Ron Johnson, I think, was more vulnerable than Susan Collins. And I think sometimes the Democrats thought that because Ron Johnson was so vulnerable, basically it didn't really matter. Pretty much anybody will beat him, right?
Yeah, full disclosure, I worked for Alex Lassery in the primary. It was a crowded primary, but basically once the state treasurer Gajewski stopped advertising, all of her vote went to Mandela Barnes. Alex Lassery would have cleaned the floor with Johnson, and I think when you look at all the other things that happened on the ballot, especially with Tony Evers, who barely won the first time, we always have these elections that are decided by 30,000 votes either way in Wisconsin.
Yeah, Wisconsin breaks my mind and heart every time. I wish they would just stop being so on the bubble.
Yeah, well, we've won a bunch of state Supreme Court races. There's a lot of our clients who are now on the court. Justice Janet, Justice Crawford. We've taken control of the court. They've drawn fair lines, so now we have fair elections in Wisconsin. And I think we're going to probably flip the Assembly and the Senate. So there's good things happen when you get good candidates. We've had 3 strong women who've now won 3 straight Supreme Court races because their credentials were impeccable and they were beyond reproach as candidates. And we won all 3 of them. And even Tony Evers won by 3 points on the exact same ballot where Mandela Barnes lost. So there was no reason environmentally that we shouldn't have won that race. And even with Trump winning in 2024, you saw Tammy Baldwin win. So, like, when we nominate good candidates, and oh, by the way, if you see a pattern here, a lot of the good candidates are women. They're women because guess what? We don't run into the Graham Plattner problems with women. And there's a little bit of the progressive movement, the Bernie Bros and such, where there's a little misogyny mixed into the stuff, which I think is uncomfortable at minimum and stupid when you're trying to have someone who is electable. Women control elections in every state and in every place. And when we do well, when Democrats do well with women, we win. And when we run these folks who belittle or disparage or assault women, we lose.
Well, I think that a lot of what you're saying makes sense to me, but sure, we should pick the strongest candidate, the candidate who is least easy to attack. But also, people are really mad. I mean, I get so many texts with people like, I'll never vote for a Democrat who wants to turn the other cheek. I want somebody who's going to hold people's feet to the fire. I want investigations. I want prosecutions. There is quite a bit of emotion this time around.
Well, and look, most elections, people don't use their head. They use their heart and their gut. That's how they decide elections. And the Republicans understand that in how they advertise and how they show up on social media, that they do a better job in general at getting to people's gut and to getting to people's heart, mostly because they run on fear. The disadvantage, structurally for Democrats is we tend to run on hope. And when people are this economically pinched and feel this hopeless that the healthcare system's against them, the way wages and CEOs and businesses, grocery chains are against them, they just feel like, insurance companies are against them, that everything that they just want to burn it all down.
Yep.
I get the emotion. And so I think we've got to find candidates like Tallarico who speak to that anger in a way that isn't just the lefty version of Trump, that is inspiring and thoughtful and hopeful.
Peter,
but he doesn't pull any punches either. He's
Yeah, I want to talk more about James Tallarico because I am delighted with James Tallarico. I'm talking to Peter Giangreco. We are going to take a break. We'll be back with more after this.
Don't turn that dial.
A dangerous mistake to make.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now on WCPT 820.
Broadcast professional, turn on your mic. I am joined by Peter Giangreco of the Strategy Group. And right before we went to a break, you started to talk about James Tallarico. And one of the things that first drew me to James Tallarico is he seems to have been, in my experience, the first candidate that takes that Christian area and makes it his own in a way that is beautiful and believable. And clearly it's coming from his heart. And I think that that's one of the things, you're right. Republicans like people to get angry. And one of the ways to get them angry is by, going after their Christianity or that sort of thing. And I think James Tallarico takes that argument for himself, makes it his own in a way that is really amazing, I think.
Yeah, and he's got more than that, too. He tells the story about the first time he ran for state rep, and he was, it was a tough, Republican district, and he decided, I got to do some things differently. So he decides, I'm going to walk across the district. He's like 25 miles, something like that. And he did all these town halls in between it. He's going, and it's a hot day. It's Texas, and just feels terrible. And staff says, oh, you're probably just dehydrated. And he goes home and sleeps for 36 hours, and he ends up going to the hospital. Turns out he was type 1 diabetic, didn't know it. And he was able, in a veto-proof Republican majority in Texas, to pass a law to reduce when he went to the store after they let him out of the hospital, he had to pay $680 for insulin, which is like the cheapest drug in the world to make. So he gets elected to the Senate, or to the State House, in a Republican majority with a Republican governor, gets them to pass $25 insulin, and it's what the Biden administration used as the model for passing that national line. Now nobody pays more than $35, I don't think, for insulin, and they've got a bunch of other drugs that they're going to try to get to do that. So it's not just his unique way of speaking. It's also his life experience. And when we have folks with life experience, whether it's AOC as a waitress, Tammy Baldwin, who, her dad was never in her life. Her mom was a drug addict. She was raised by her parents. She was very sick as a teenager. And the only thing that kept her alive was that her parents, who had adopted grandparents, were on Medicare. And so she had health care. So she wrote the law that if you can stay on your parents' health care until you're 26. Tammy Duckworth, goes and serves in Iraq. People know her story. When you have these personal stories about being up against this tough economy and this horrible healthcare system that we have, the insurance companies, to have somebody who's fought and won and then turns that into legislation that helps everybody, that's when we are at our best as a party.
Peter, do you think that Ken Paxton, because the polling that I've seen, they're neck and neck. Ken Paxton is quite possibly one of the most horrible human beings I have ever had the misfortune to read about. Why is this race so close?
Because Texas is flat out Republican, and it's tough. But here's the good news. Donald Trump won Texas going away, mainly because Latino voters he appealed to. And he appealed to them on a couple of things. Number one, a lot of Latinos in Texas are third, fourth generation Americans. Their ancestors have been in this country longer than my ancestors. And so what Trump talked about on immigration resonated with them because, they see their hospitals and their schools and some of the negative impacts of undocumented children and such. It kind of rang true to them. The other thing was a lot of Latinos are working class and they couldn't afford things. So between affordability and immigration, Trump made great inroads with the Latino vote. Now, things cost even more than they did, certainly at the grocery store, at the gas pump, than they did even, 2 years ago. And on top of that, Trump has sent a message to Latino voters the way ICE, overreached and killed U.S. citizens, abducted people. That was a giant turnoff. So he didn't solve the affordability problem. In fact, prices are higher than they were in a lot of ways. Beef's never been higher. Coffee's never been higher. Gas was up there for a while. So didn't solve the problem he said he would solve, and then kind of has gone the other way, where Latino voters that were appreciated, some of the negative fallout of our broken immigration system, thought Trump was the answer, have now completely gone the other way. And so if you look at the crosstabs of the public polling in Texas, the big difference between now and 2 years ago is where Latino voters are. And you've got an influx of people, especially in places like Austin, where it's a lot of young people who are college educated, who come from the North or come from California, who are not the kind of conservatives that move to places like Nashville. Okay, so just different people going to San Antonio, going to Austin, going to Dallas, going to Houston. And the younger slice of the vote in Texas is becoming much less conservative. So those are the two big dynamics, is where are younger voters and where are Latino voters. And that's what's putting in independence, that's what's putting Tallarico in a statistical dead heat most of those polls. So this is our one shot at Texas. I mean, the winds at our back, we've got the best candidate we could have. They have about the worst candidate they could have, and we still might lose because it's Texas.
Do you think the Latino vote that went for Trump has changed, not just because he didn't make things less expensive, but because of what Stephen Miller has done with ICE? If they're brown, just pick them up and we'll sort it out later. Is that something?
There's no question about it.
Yeah.
No question about it. And look, you got to remember, there are a lot of Latino families who have a son, a daughter, a cousin who are in law enforcement, who are deputy sheriffs, who are local police officers, who might work for the Border Patrol. So there's not there's a different, I think, feeling towards law enforcement in the Latino community than maybe in the black community. Yet, the way Trump and Stephen Miller have made this so all about race and so all about rage and this just incredibly unconstitutional, un-American. Ronald Reagan would be embarrassed to be a Republican these days.
I don't think he would be a Republican.
No, because he understood what makes America great are immigrants. 46% of the Fortune 500 companies were started by immigrants or children of immigrants. But this Trump, this MAGA movement has, you can't talk to them in facts. You can't tell them that American-born citizens have, much higher rates of committing crimes than immigrants because they just aren't interested in facts. And when things aren't going well, just point at somebody else that doesn't look like you and say they're the problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's the first, second, and third card out of every Republican deck is that.
I want to switch gears a little bit. I've had people say that public officials should be held to a higher standard. This was talked about a lot when Tom Keene disappeared for more than 117 days from the Congress, missed more than 100 votes, and nobody had any idea what was going on, at least nobody who was willing to talk about it. And, at the end of this time, he was being treated for depression. It was serious. He had to be hospitalized. And basically the belief is it was nobody's business. Now, it has come out that apparently during April and May, while he was hospitalized, he was also trading stocks. But you know what? Whatever.
Right.
And now we have Mitch McConnell, Laurel Loomer supposedly posting that he's brain dead. Scott Jennings said that he talked to him today for 20 minutes. Do we have a right to know what's going on?
Well, I think in the Kentucky situation, there's a big legal piece of this, and whether the people of Kentucky are going to have a senator that can do the job. This whole delay, don't say anything about Mitch is all about August 3rd, because if he's incapacitated or dead before August 3rd, it triggers a special election, and then the people of Kentucky get to choose. If you get past August 3rd, McConnell keeps the seat, whether he's alive, dead, somewhere in between, until January. And that matters. So, I think we had this in Texas with Kay Granger, who was a sitting member of Congress who missed hundreds and hundreds of votes. Yeah. She was in a memory care unit.
Yeah.
Look, people get sick, and we shouldn't joke about it. We should treat them with respect and empathy, and they should get the treatment they deserve. And that applies to Graham Plattner and to John Fetterman and folks. But you don't. You don't. This is not your seat. It's the people's seat. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, whether you're old, whether you're young, none of that stuff matters. If you don't show up for the job, we have the right to say, okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't show up on the floor of the House, then it triggers a special election.
If indeed this goes past August 3rd, and like you say, whether he lives or dies, the seat belongs to Mitch McConnell, that would seem to take a Republican vote away from John Thune, which would seem to be something that John Thune would not want. Is John Thune, do you think, working behind the scenes to figure out what's going on with Mitch and what should be done about it?
I don't know. You're way beyond my pay grade. I don't talk to John Thune. John Thune.
But it would seem to be in his best interest to have a Republican vote that he can count on, as opposed to an empty seat that won't be voting on things.
I don't know Kentucky law. If they vacate the seat,
If they vacate the
would
seat,
would a Democratic governor, Bashir, be able to appoint?
No, there has to be a special election. I've been corrected on this long enough. They passed in 2024. The state legislature passed a rule that if a Senate seat is vacated, there has to be a special election. It's not just the governors to give away.
Right. And it's different in every state. I mean, people are talking about, is Mark Kelly going to run for president? Well, his Senate seat is up. But the good news there is Arizona law is if you vacate the seat, either because you got elected president or he passed away or whatever the circumstances are, the governor has to appoint someone of the exact same party. So if Katie Hobbs wins re-election as the Democratic governor of Arizona, it's probably more likely that Kelly runs for president because he knows that they're not going to go and change the rule. If you got a Republican governor in Arizona, that the Republican governor and a Republican legislature are going to go change that law and allow the governor to pick whoever they want. So the only way to keep that law in effect in Arizona is to reelect Katie Hobbs. So, you got to look into the vagaries of all this. And look, this is why legislative races mean so much, governor's races mean so much, is because the Republican Party, if they've got power, will change the rules no matter what, because they're really good at hanging on to power. They don't really believe in a lot of things, but they believe in power.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can stick it to you, they'll do it.
I'm with Peter Giangreco of the Strategy Group. He advises Democratic candidates. We're going to take a break and be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Peter Giangreco is with me. He is a Democratic strategist who advises clients. I don't know if you already know that somebody you're going to advise is going to run in 2028, but let's set that aside for now. I have been really surprised at the push that Rahm Emanuel has made. If 6 months ago, I would have said, there's no way, there's no way. And yet he's everywhere. He's making speeches. He's got a couple of really snazzy phrases that he's throwing out. I mean, tomorrow he's supposed to speak at Tel Aviv University, and he's basically going to say, Israel is great, but you don't really need so much of our help anymore, so maybe you shouldn't have it. What do you think of Rahm Emanuel? And do you think, I remember Teddy Kennedy, everybody was telling him he should run for president, and that, the whole incident at Chappaquiddick was water under the bridge until he declared for president. And suddenly what happened with Mary Jo Kopechne, the woman who drowned while she was in his car, that was back in the news again. And I was always under the impression that Laquan McDonald, if Rahm Emanuel really gets into the race, Laquan McDonald, you talk about something that Republicans can use to attack somebody. There were a lot of serious questions about that matter and how it was handled. What do you think?
Well, I think Rahm has, of everybody who's thinking about running for president, has really laid out the new ideas, the fresh ideas that our party really needs. I think what he's talking about on Israel is smart and pretty brilliant. I think he's going to write the next chapter of really where our party and where our country is going to be on Israel. And it's not just on 8. What he's saying is, if Israel is not seriously moving towards creating a Palestinian homeland, then they don't get any aid. That's what if you read Politico, that's one of he wants to put a series of preconditions. And he argues that they aren't actually punitive, that they'll actually getting rid of Netanyahu is not enough. You got to change Israel's behavior because, as he says, Israel is a pariah state right now. That what's going on in Gaza, what's going on in the West Bank, you can't keep building more settlements in the West Bank and expect to get U.S. support. And I think it's going to be a really interesting speech to give, because I think what Rahm is doing on the 75-year-old term limit for all federal employees, including Supreme Court judges and U.S. senators and members of Congress, I think these are all things that really make a lot of sense, and they cut through. These aren't like 20-page documents where you got to have a law degree to figure out what the policy is. They're clear. They're where people want it. They speak to the frustrations that we've had. I mean, we've had presidents of both parties that have been very supportive of Israel's right to exist and provides aid, and then you have Netanyahu or whoever. When we have an opinion about how Israel's behaving, they tell us to go pound salt. Well, guess what? It's time for Israel to act like all of our other allies. There's no unconditional support. There's no blank checks. You want weapons, you pay for them. You want our support, then you've got to listen to us, and you've got to create a viable Palestinian state. And they're doing just the opposite in the West Bank.
Yeah.
And this whole notion of a greater Israel where they're going to use their military, Rahm is going to take it part. I'm going to watch the speech, because I think this is one of these seminal moments, and he may never end up being president, but I think in a lot of ways he is laying out the blueprint of ideas that, especially on education, where he goes after the Republicans for not funding it and goes after Democrats for no accountability, and talks about what's working in places like Mississippi with reading scores. This is really a issues blueprint that we can run on, and we can win at all levels. And so I think Rahm's doing the party a great service. He may not ever, get to the top of the mountain, but you got to have to listen to what he's got to say, because he's got some great ideas.
I was talking at the beginning of the show about the Politico article, and I read a little bit of it on the air. I didn't read this particular sentence about Rahm Emanuel. He's an establishment centrist who is deeply mistrusted by many of the more left-leaning, insurgent, and increasingly Israel-skeptical activists who reasonably believe their energy will power the party's next generation. It seems pretty spot on to me. What do you think?
I think that's probably fair about how a slice of the party feels about Rahm. But what he's talking about is actually something that can unite a party that's been divided over Israel and Gaza, and can unite the party around a set of, honestly, tough love is what he calls it. That it's time for us to assert that there's a certain way that you act as an ally of ours, and when you stop acting that way, there are repercussions to it. Instead of having, Bibi flip us off every time we object to what Israel's doing in the world. And unfortunately with Trump, you've got somebody who just, Bibi rolled into this. I mean, he has pitched this Iran war idea to Obama, to the first Trump administration, which at least had some adults who were smart enough to say this is a really dumb idea, pitched it to Biden. Everybody said no to it because they all knew it was crazy. But when you're left with Trump, who's, a dim bulb and a bunch of, yes men around him, you end up, Bibi got us to do his dirty work for him in Iran, and it's totally backfired. It backfired on Israel, it's backfired on the U.S., and it's empowered Iran. And guess what? Turns out Obama had the right idea of how to deal with Iran, and Trump's been wrong since he rescinded that deal. We had boots on the ground that was looking at nuclear material. And now all we have are grainy satellite photos, and we have to take Israel's intelligence for truth when it turned out to be all wrong. So Obama was right, Trump was wrong, and it's all played out this way. And I think Rahm has done us a favor in putting together an Israel policy that makes this more of a co-equal relationship and not a whatever Israel says goes. That's not a true friend. That's not a true ally. There should be repercussions when you tell the president of the United States to,
well, yeah,
pound sand.
With this Iran war that Netanyahu, I believe, talked Trump into, the result has been an Israel that's more isolated than ever. And in this country, a younger generation, I won't say that the younger generation is anti-Israel, but they certainly don't have the same Israel no matter what, no matter where, no matter when kind of attitude that much of the United States has had for a long time. I think this has been a disaster. It's been a disaster. It's made Iran stronger. It's shown that we maybe are just a paper tiger, and Israel is more isolated than it's ever been. Is there a winner that you see in this other than maybe Iran, because they've gotten a sense of their strength in the Middle East?
Well, I mean, the ball's really in Israel's court here. If they have an election this fall, they've got to vote Netanyahu out. And I think if there is a straight-up choice, if there was a straight-up referendum, he'd be gone. But that's not enough. It's not enough just to get rid of Netanyahu. There has to be a change in behavior. And that's what Ram is going to outline tomorrow. It's not enough to just, you can pick the legislation. Kasten's got a legislation. Ramirez has got ban the bombs. I think what Ram's talking about is actually much more thoughtful and could really change the dynamics. He's not talking about a two-state solution. He's talking about a 23-state solution where we demand that the surrounding Arab countries actually, who want nothing to do with the Palestinians, don't want Palestinian immigration into their country, to actually say the only way we're all safe is if we if everybody rebuilds Gaza and builds a Palestinian state that can be viable. That's the only way you're ever going to get peace in the Middle East. And
where
it's
will
not
Jared
just a
put his
two-state
hotels?
solution, it's a 23-state solution.
Where will Jared put his hotels? Because, they only want the Palestinians to be like the maids and the bartenders and all the luxury hotels.
Well, he can go to his little island in Albania.
Oh, no. Did you see where not only do Albanians not want him to be able to buy that island, they don't want Jared and Ivanka to set foot in Albania ever again.
Yeah, the woman who's cut my hair for years, Elda, she's Albanian. She's been telling me about this for years now. They've got this secret deal, and nobody in Albania is willing to stand up. Well, guess what? They got people out in the streets. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of people in the streets where they've just said enough is enough, and you might have some real change there. But they'll just have to find some other island to build their hotel on.
I guess so. Peter, we only have a minute left, so maybe this is unfair, but what do you think the odds are that the Democratic Party retakes the Senate?
I think it's slim. I mean, we really have to draw an inside straight. I mean, I think if we fix this, if Plattner does the right thing, the odds go way up because, you can see a path in North Carolina. It's not going to be easy. You can see a path in Maine with a different nominee. It's not going to be easy, but you see a path. That gets us halfway there. Ohio's looked good. I think Turek in Iowa is a tremendous candidate. And I think what's going on with the rural economy going south and price of fertilizer and everything else, I think Iowa's in play. We could pick up 3 House seats, a Senate seat, and a governor's seat in Iowa. Alaska looks good. So we've just got to make sure we don't shoot ourselves in the foot in places like Michigan and Maine, which are states we should win in a year where the wind's at our back. So, but it's still, everything has to go right. And we still have to win Georgia, and we still have to win Minnesota, where the fraud scandal's a real problem for Democrats. So, it's not going to be easy. I would probably put it at 20% or less. Mm-hmm. But it's not going to get much better in 28. I mean, basically, we have the other North Carolina seat and the seat that Mandela Barnes lost in Wisconsin as the 2 pickups. So, we're never going to have a huge majority in the Senate, but who knows? Maybe we win Nebraska and we win some of these other states like Iowa that have been historically tough. But it's still going to be tough. So people if you got your $25, go find a Senate race and spread it around because it does matter, and we're just not raising enough grassroots money like we were in years past. So find a candidate that turns you on, whether it's Turek or somebody else, Talarico or Sherrod Brown or somebody you like in Michigan, and give your money because the other side's got plenty. We're going to get swamped everywhere on money, and it's our grassroots folks have got to step up and sometimes hold their nose, but like your $25 really matters.
Peter, thank you so much for spending so much of your afternoon with us. It is a delight to talk with you.
Always good to hear from you. And my brother says you guys are overdue for breakfast at Green Bay Cafe.
Oh, yeah. He says that all the time, and then he disappears. I'm tired of his breakfast lunch promises that never go anywhere. Tell him I'm done with him.
Wow. You want to have breakfast?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll show up.
Right. Thanks, Peter. Take care of yourself.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
We're going to take a break for news. We'll be back with more after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I am very pleased to welcome back to our airwaves Professor Suzanne Chod, Professor of Political Science and the Director of the Center for Social Impact at North Central College in Naperville. Susan, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, Joan. How are you? Are you dry and safe after the weekend?
I actually had a very quiet 4th of July, but that's okay. That's kind of how I like it. We put up our flag and then, we just kind of took it easy all weekend long. And I think that's a fine way to contemplate this country and its origins and its future.
Oh, I could not agree more. That's my kind of 4th for sure.
Yeah. One of the I want to start with probably the biggest story of the day, which is Graham Plattner, the Democratic choice to run for Senate in Maine, who has stumbled upon another controversy. He had his Nazi tattoo. There were other controversies about things that he had posted on social media. And now by at least 2 women, he has been accused of, one of the women has accused him of rape. The other woman accused him of sexual assault. He has been called upon to leave the primary, and he has lost virtually every endorsement that he has gotten. He has not made a statement about what he is going to do, but unless he withdraws before Monday, the state Democratic Party is going to be in trouble and to get somebody else on the ballot. What do you think, with everybody's pointing to Al Franken and how the wave of, you should resign, and he resigned. And then afterwards, when it was investigated, it wasn't found to be the huge deal that it looked like it was going to be in the beginning. And even Kirsten Gillibrand, who called for Al Franken to resign, she has later said, I spoke too soon. I shouldn't have done that. I should have let the investigation play out. Because she believes when the investigation played out, it didn't seem like the charges against him were anywhere near as serious as they first seemed to be. So what does Graham Plattner do? Some people have said he's holding out. He's going to step aside, but he wants to have a voice in who is replacing him, and that's why he's holding off on this. How do you see this whole situation?
Yeah, it's... I feel all kinds of ways about it, both as a political scientist and as a voter. And then I will just say as a woman, I think as well, there's sort of three things at play here. But I think, the conversation luckily has shifted to him dropping out. But I think it's important to note that conversation didn't start until the allegations from that we heard yesterday from the woman who did say that he definitively did rape her when he came to her home. And that while the story and the way she recounts it with such bravery and talks in as much detail as she can, we should honor that. I think it's important to note that it took that for the Democratic Party, for people like Bernie Sanders, for voters in the Democratic caucus to say, okay, maybe now this might not be the person that we want to vote for. When there were all of the other things that you just recounted, from the Nazi tattoo to other allegations, which there are things that voters have to decide whether these things about the candidates in front of them are passable, are tenable, are acceptable for what benefit they think they might get for that person serving in office. And I think it's really a reflection of how divided the country is. And every time we say, like, oh, we can't get more divided, we can't get more divided, I think that this is an indication of that there are voters who would rather vote for someone who has multiple sexual assault and rape allegations against them and had a Nazi tattoo than vote for a Republican, or vote for Susan Collins, or, to be honest, not vote at all, which is also a choice, but seen as a choice to vote for the other party. So I think there's a reflection of where we sit, and it doesn't sit well with me where we sit.
There's also now the controversy, I don't know, the opposition, the centrist Democrats who were behind Janet Mills, who Graham Plattner trounced, and the progressive, more left-wing Democrats who were represented by Graham Plattner. In the New York Times article on this, they quote the executive director of Our Revolution, which was, of course, the Bernie Sanders group, said, to the Democratic establishment, this is not your opening. Mainers didn't vote by an overwhelming margin against Janet Mills and the DSCC's hand-picked pick just to be handed another status quo candidate anyway. And then the New York Times also reports that the party's establishment is kind of saying to the progressives, you know, maybe it might be a time right now to be a little bit humble. I think this is going to be a really interesting choice made by the Democratic Party of Maine. I do think Plattner will step aside, though he hasn't indicated that yet. But the question is, who is going to replace him? Does the left wing of the party hold sway because that's who they picked to represent them? Or is this an opportunity for the more mainstream Democrats to step up, as long as it's anybody but Janet Mills?
Yeah, this is a question for the Democratic Party more generally, and I think it gets a little bit muddled in conversations about individual states, right? So after we saw progressive candidates win across New York in the primary a few weeks ago, of course, after Mamdani won the mayoral race, and we see progressive candidates winning in states where progressive candidates can also win the general election, there's this larger conversation about this is the way the whole party is moving. These are candidates that the party needs to embrace and endorse and put their money behind. And I'm not saying that that isn't a strategy that should be considered, but I think that this has to be a state-by-state strategy, not a writ large strategy for the Democratic Party. And I think when the parties try to have a larger strategy like that, we've seen decades previous that this doesn't always yield general election results. And so I think this is what the Maine Democratic Party has to really look at: voter turnout, voter history, who is likely to turn out in a midterm in Maine, which is not the same as who turns out in a midterm, in a presidential election in Maine, and which candidate can win. And that might be a candidate that is just as progressive or more than Plattner. It might be a candidate that is more, quote, establishment like Mills, but not Mills. But this is a decision that the party has to make in order to have the best chance of winning in the general election. And I worry that the larger conversation and push from Democratic parties in other states may lead them in a direction that isn't going to get them the results they want in the general election.
You mean they would be influenced by what's going on in other states or the National Democratic Party?
I think both of those, yes. That there's, we know that the Democratic Party is sort of in this identity crisis in ways the Republican Party had been previously, Democratic Party had been previously. We see every couple of decades, each party, as it loses subsequent elections and loses favor with their voters, has to think about what is the future direction. And I think that what is challenging about the moment where we sit now is that when we didn't hate the other party so much that we would rather vote for somebody who had a Nazi tattoo, they could have these conversations about let's look at who our voters are, who the country is, and let's think about how we might be able to bring voters along with us. But the stakes feel so high for voters right now that it's hard to think about voting for the other party. But that doesn't work in every state. Where you look at Arizona, putting a progressive candidate up in Arizona will never work because it is the most independently minded state in the country. And I'm not comparing Maine to Arizona, but I am saying that, yes, Maine is, more liberal than other states, but it isn't as liberal as New York.
No,
and so
by a long shot.
by a long shot. That's exactly right. And so I worry that, again, as you noted, as I said before, this sort of larger conversation about it's time for the establishment Democrats to step aside and see where the country is asking its party to go. There are voters in states that are saying that's the direction they want their party to go, but it's not the direction every voter in the base is asking the party to go.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be a really interesting election. And I think that there's a lot of people, younger folks in the Democratic Party, who want to say goodbye to the Janet Millses of the world and the Chuck Schumers of the world. But the question is, okay, you don't want that kind of old guard. Who are you gonna vote for? Who is the young up and coming candidate that's like an AOC or a Zoran Mamdani? And do you have one? And if you don't, do you go more to the middle? Suzanne, we need to take a break. I'm talking to political science professor Suzanne Chod from North Central College in Naperville. We will be right back after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by political science professor Suzanne Chod of North Central College in Naperville. And I want to switch gears a little bit to our president, Donald Trump, who has arrived in Turkey for a NATO summit. I don't know about you, but I am waiting for the embarrassing stories to start coming out of how he fell asleep during a meeting or named somebody by the wrong name or something else that is just humiliating. And it's going to come. You know it's going to come. I don't know if you saw that press conference he gave. I don't know who the audience was, but he was talking about the woman in charge of the Small Business Administration and how she's doing such a fabulous job. It's really going really well. And that woman is Nicki Minaj. Nicki Minaj is in charge of the Small Business Administration, and boy, she couldn't be doing a better job. What? Hello? So how long is it going to be before he humiliates us?
Well, I think it depends on how you define that. If it's the things that you're describing, these are things that likely happen in bilateral meetings before we are even going to hear about. And he loves the opportunity to talk in front of the crowd. And so with time difference and exhaustion, we might see something more public like what you're describing. But I think there's kind of other ways to talk about things that might, maybe humiliate's not the right word, but might sort of feed the narrative of how unserious potentially the country is. And he did it today again by talking about the United States should run Greenland. And while we know he's not going to let this go, to say that at a NATO summit, when doing what he is describing would essentially render NATO null and void, again, is how serious is the leader of our nation when he comes into the NATO summit, which really was in Turkey, so he would attend. And the thing on his mind, the first thing he says is, I think the United States should attend.
Well, forget about not seeing eye to eye with our allies. He's already talking about having a conflict with our allies. He's back now that he feels he's gotten out of the situation in Iran. He's back on the whole Greenland bandwagon. We should be in charge of Greenland, not Denmark. And it's, it's no coincidence that not only in the last 6-8 months has Denmark started doing military training exercises in Greenland, but many of the countries in Europe have been sending over military groups so they could do quote unquote exercises in Greenland. I don't care if he can't see eye to eye with NATO. I just don't want him to go to war with it. And I don't know that that's off the table.
Well, based on what you just said, which is absolutely right, and then also the conversations, a little bit of what we heard in the meetings today about wanting to pull our military support away from NATO, which means no military support for Europe. With the leader of NATO was talking about how other countries have to step up with the money that they have promised, and if they don't, there are ways to get around that, because that's presuming that the United States will no longer be an active part of NATO, both in terms of person power and of resources. And all of this is happening while Russia is still escalating against Ukraine. And we know the president of Ukraine is there right now. And our president is still talking about being mad at countries for not helping with Iran. And so what we see is sort of the circling of our president continually talking about ways in which he will fracture our relationships with our closest allies. But what always happens, and your friend and mine, Bill Muck, will say this more than anyone, is if we create a power vacuum, there are other countries that are all too excited to fill it, and we're not going to like what that looks like if they fill it.
Well, some of the people I read would argue that that's already taken place, that we have given so much power to China. We've awoken Iran to what power they could potentially wield in the Middle East. I don't know. I mean, how much more we could give away at this point.
Up?
I mean, did you see? I think it was the Netherlands has announced that they're going to spend like 3.3 billion euros with, buying munitions maybe from Germany. They're going to do some deals with China. They're going to do some deals with France. Nowhere did anybody mention the United States. Nowhere did anybody mention the United States.
That's exactly right. And these are the consequences of the choices that the president made in his first term, that President Biden tried as best as he could to sort of mitigate and undo, and that has been doubled down in Trump's second term. And I think what's also indicative of this is his close friendship with the president of Turkey and the legitimizing of Turkey's role in geopolitics, which is something that Erdogan has been pushing since he came into office in the early 2000s. And Turkey's sort of purposeful insertion in geopolitics, particularly in the Middle East. And the more that President Trump, for example, is going to now lift the sanctions against Turkey and sell these fighter jets because we don't sanction our friends. Now, this is an example again of providing resources for a country that has been positioning itself, but now has been garnering favor with this current president to continue to position themselves as a major player at our own expense.
And I don't think it was a coincidence that Benjamin Netanyahu sat down for an interview with CNN's Dana Bash. And, he was trying to kind of thread the needle. And he said, it's okay, if Erdogan and Donald Trump are friends, but Donald Trump should remember that Turkey is not our friend. And Netanyahu is very upset that this deal to sell F-35 fighter jets is on the table. He seems to think that's a very bad idea. And I have a feeling that's why he did the interview, so he could get his thoughts before an American audience.
I think that's exactly right. And I think this shows again that even though Netanyahu and President Trump were allies in their fight against Iran and worked together, maybe more at the behest of Netanyahu and Israel, is that the end goal for our nation and for Israel in the region is actually not the same. And, we know Israel wants to maintain its superiority in the region in terms of military superpower. But if Turkey gets the resources that we are now saying they're going to get, that threatens that stability for Israel. So it's going to be President Trump's decision to buddy up more with Erdogan in this case actually could be could create more fractures in his relationship with Netanyahu. And then what would that look like moving forward, especially in not just in Iran, but in the region more generally?
Political science professor Suzanne Chad, thank you for being with us today. Always a pleasure to talk with you. And thanks for sharing your time with us. We are going to take a break, and we are going to be back with more. We're going to talk about the 4th of July and travel right after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Everybody was wondering what the 4th of July travel would look like. Could people afford gas? Were people going to be taking airplanes? Were people going to be stuck by the thousands in security lines? Those were all questions that were on the table. Thought we would talk to Joe Brancatelli, who does the business travel newsletter Joe Sent Me, joesentme.com, and find out how did this weekend shake out. Joe, how are you?
Happy after 4th of July, Joan. It shook out okay.
You know, I read a couple of things that I wanted to run by you because on the one hand, I've read that people are vacationing in the United States in greater numbers than ever before. And then I read another article that said, oh, Americans are going to Europe in hordes, just as many as ever went. So where are people going and how are they getting there?
Well, things are a little warped this summer because, again, 250, changed everything for people, for good and for bad. We have the World Cup, which I know Americans don't even now quite understand what the World Cup means. Soccer fans, football fans, travel. They're all over America. And by the way, they've loved it. Thankfully, ICE has been low profile, so not too many people got busted. So you have those people flooding into America. On the other hand, the Canadians are not coming because, we have a president who makes fun of them and denigrates them at every turn. So why would they come here? But then Americans, yes, are traveling in unbelievable numbers to Europe, so much so that the airlines are stretching the seasons. The traditional summer travel season, the airlines used to run from late March to late October. Some of them have stretched it from February into January now. That's how much demand.
What do you mean by that? Do you mean that they change where their planes go or add more flights?
They add more flights. For example, a seasonal flight from Chicago traditionally would run from, say, around March 25th to around October 25th. That's what the airlines call the summer season. And like everything else with the airlines, that makes no sense, but that's what they call it. There's been so much demand and increasing demand for Europe outside of when people think it might be too hot, that suddenly flights that were meant to end in October are now running well into November and Christmas. And for next year, for the 2027 season, airlines are saying, maybe we'll start that flight in mid-February instead of late March. The demand, at least right now, is still there, despite the prices.
Is it true that even though people are going to Europe, they're not hitting like the Londons and the Parises, they're hitting more of the smaller towns and cities? Is that a trend you're seeing?
I think absolutely it is, as Americans get smarter. Again, if you date modern history in the airline business, really goes no further back than COVID anymore. So there was all that revenge travel that Americans took, and they went over, their first trip, most people's first trip is to London, and then maybe they go to Paris, and then maybe they go to Rome. Well, they've done London, they've done Paris, they've done Rome. So they look for the next place. Maybe if they loved England, they go to Cornwall and go find where Doc Martin used to, fake his practice. Right now on the Joe Sent Me homepage, which you can read for free, our contributor Carol Pucci writes about third-tier Italian destinations, not Milan, Rome, Venice anymore, not even the secondary cities like Genoa and Bologna, where Americans are so anxious to get to Italy, they're down to the third-tier cities like Bari in Palermo, and way into the north, towns like Verona, which, by the way, is beautiful, and along the coasts. They're just looking for somewhere to go that's new.
Was the 4th of July travel weekend as busy as it had been predicted to be?
No, at least from the flying standpoint. as I'm putting out in the members newsletter tonight, the TSA had said they were prepared for 18.7 million travelers from June 30th to yesterday, July 6th. They actually got 18.1 million. 18.1 is also somewhat less than traveled last year over the same week. I don't know what it means. It could be people saying, well, okay, it was too expensive to fly, or it could be some travel fatigue after, this revenge tour that Americans have been on for the last 5 years, or it might mean nothing at all. 500,000 travelers less than you thought when we're talking in the tens of millions. It's hard to make judgments right now.
The Midwest, the East Coast, and much of Europe is seeing some pretty strange weather and pretty awful heat. Is that affecting travel in any way?
Well, it's interesting. The Wall Street Journal ran a fascinating piece about Americans who read about the heat wave and saying, well, I'm from Texas, this doesn't matter. So what's 95 degrees? Well, it may be one thing to be 95 degrees in Texas or Alabama or Florida when you're never out of the air conditioning. You go to Europe and many of the places do not have air conditioning. And in old places like Rome, where there are stone walls that continue to radiate the heat well into the evening. And even Americans who think they're used to the heat are shocked by it. But yes, we're looking at another crazy heat wave, which would be the third one for Europe this year. And meanwhile, here today, this morning, it was 63 degrees in Cold Spring, which is in the Hudson Valley where I live, which is right across from West Point. It was 103 Thursday. So
Good
do
God.
the math. But we have no climate change, even though the temperature has changed by 50 degrees in 96 hours.
That's one of the things that when people say, it's cold, so there's no global warming. It's the fact that the weather that we've always had, the hurricanes, the tornadoes, their seasons are longer, and especially with hurricanes, they're much more serious. We are seeing weather, bizarre weather. We had that in Chicago too. 60 one day and 90 the next day. That is, I believe, one of the signs of the apocalypse, Joe.
It could be. You never think of your weatherman as one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse or weatherwoman, but it could be. And, that's only what we're hearing about, Joan. Do you want to, I would hear I could literally hear the readers snapping off if I wanted to talk about the typhoon that hit Hainan Island just off China, which Hainan Island is sort of the Las Vegas of China, but it's on an island. Well, a very serious typhoon hit there this morning. That's not usual. Rome had literally golf ball sized hail for about an hour last week. I sent the pictures to people and I said, make sure your sound is on, because you haven't lived until you've heard golf ball sized hail hitting Vespas and knocking them over. So the weather is just chaotic and crazy, and causing all kinds of things. I could tell you the tale of the 17-hour flight from Charlotte to Chicago on Friday if you want.
Please tell me the tale.
Okay. Well, American Airlines runs a flight from their Charlotte hub to their hub at O'Hare. It leaves at 1:05 normally, gets in about 2 hours later. Well, this one on Friday left 7.5 hours late. Okay. Then when it finally got close to O'Hare on Friday, people may remember, there were thunderstorms. Mm-hmm. So the plane had to divert to Minneapolis. It sat on the ground in Minneapolis for 2 hours and didn't leave Minneapolis again until after midnight and arrived at 1:22. So the flight, which normally would take you 2 hours, if you were on it, took you 13 hours last Friday.
Oh my God. And I thought we had it bad. my daughter was supposed to fly in from California on Friday, which, you know, I knew Thursday was supposed to be a busy travel day. I figured Friday it would be a little better. But there were all the storms. So, you know, they kept pushing back her flight and pushing back her flight. And then finally she was going to take the flight. Oh, wait, nope, there's storms in Chicago. Oh, they're staggering the landing. So we're going to push it back again and again and again. And all I could think of at that point was, I don't care how late it is. I just want her to get in. I just want her to get in. I just want her to get in. And she did. It was late, but she did make it eventually.
It is, you know, we can adjust for many things. You can hire more TSA agents. You can push more people through PreCheck, which really you should have. PreCheck and global entry. It'll make your life as a traveler much easier. But we don't have those cool weather devices that they have on Star Trek that moderates the weather on places like Risa, the planet, you know?
Yeah.
The weather will screw up everything. And since the airlines are wildly overscheduled anyway, and I've said it here on the show, Joan, the problem with the system when it works best, even when it works best, is we're trying to push 6 pounds of sugar in a 5-pound bag. And then people complain when the bag breaks. Well, when you have bad weather, it's like taking that bag, 6-pound bags full of sugar in a 5-pound bag and putting it out in the rain. It's not going to work. And as I said, the numbers have just come in. I'll have it in the newsletter tonight. There were 49,000 delays from July 1st to July 6th. Okay?
In that short period of time?
Yeah, and that's just in the United States. I was always terrible at math. The nuns would whack me over the knuckles. But even I can figure that out. That's 8,000 delays a day.
Wow.
Okay, and almost 4,500 cancellations. Even if you have, let's say, an average of about 100 people on each flight, and that's not a bad number. That means 490,000 travelers were delayed so far just in the first 6 days of July. And it's almost all weather and the way the airlines schedule as if the weather is always perfect.
Joe, we need to take a break. I'm speaking with Joe Brancatelli of the Business Travel Newsletter Joe Sent Me. You can find it at joesentme.com. And when we come back, a couple of things I want to talk to you about. I need an update on travel in the Middle East. And also, you know, we were in the beginning of July. We have August, maybe a little bit into September. I want to talk to you about what looks right now as the best time to travel. And maybe it's where you're going. I don't know. Joe Brancatelli and I will be right back after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Joe Brancatelli is with me. He does the business travel newsletter Joe Sent Me. You can find it at joesentme.com. So let's start with an update on travel in the Middle East. Where does that stand now? Is it all back to normal?
No, it's getting there. The European carriers, just this past week or so, have largely returned to Tel Aviv. Some of them are still not going into Dubai. The big Middle Eastern carriers are mostly back to normal. But the U.S. airlines, no one has returned to Tel Aviv yet. No one has. We don't have a lot of flights elsewhere, but there are some U.S. carriers that fly into Dubai. No one's brought those back, so it will be a while. And if we were to focus on the airlines, you know, that people know that carry them into the Middle East and beyond, Emirates out of Dubai, Etihad out of Abu Dhabi, and Qatar Airways out of Qatar. And I don't know why one would be Qatar and one is Qatar. It depends on how you pronounce it. They're not interested in cutting prices. They've restored all their flights pretty much. But Emirates, which is by far the largest, said, yeah, we won't be cutting prices. So what they've done is if you book them by next week and fly them in the next 60 days, I think, they'll give you a free hotel night at the JW Marriott. And if you fly in business class, they'll give you 2 free hotel nights. But don't ask for a price, you know, don't risk your life by flying into or through Dubai. for less money, but we will give you a hotel room. So,
That's odd.
Well, is it any odder than 3 gigantic hubs in the Middle East where no one lives, carrying 70 million passengers a year beyond, their destination? I mean, if you look at a map, if you're going from the United States to Asia, especially from, our side of the Mississippi, the Middle East is a logical place to change planes. If you're trying to go into India or Vietnam or Thailand. So and Africa is badly underserved. So the Middle East carriers also serve as a Middle Eastern and Africa a transit place. So the logic is there aeronautically. But right now, you tell me what's going on between Iran and the United States. And I saw Netanyahu on CNN this morning, or this afternoon, actually, just afternoon, explaining that, he has to look out for the Israeli people. So he doesn't really care what the Americans and the Iranians do. If he judges there's a problem, he's going to deal with it. So again, this is caveat emptor if you want to fly a Middle Eastern carrier or to or through the Middle East.
Let's talk about summer travel. Is there a particular place and or a particular airline that looks particularly good to you?
Out of Chicago, not so much. If you want to come to New York, Norse Atlantic has some excellent later in the season fares in what they call their premium class, which is better than premium economy on the big airlines, not quite business class. I mean, I saw some flights from New York to Rome for under $400 one way, under $500 into the UK. These are great bargains.
The air carrier is Norse, N-O-R-S-E?
Norse Atlantic. It's based in Oslo. It's actually this sort of the successive carrier to Norwegian Air, which earlier in the decades was doing a lot of this. So there are some, discounts available. I don't know if you count this as a discount, but there's an airline called La Compagnie, which is based in Paris.
Isn't that the one that's all first class?
All business class, yes.
Oh, business class.
All business class. And we never say first class because no company in the world anymore pays for their people to fly first. So, but business class is way better than first class was 20 years ago. So, who are we kidding? They've cut their prices a little bit. They fly to 3 places from Newark, which is Paris, Milan, and Nice. And they're now down to $3,000 round trip. Earlier in the season, they were looking at $4,000. So there seems to be some opportunity, Joan. And if you absolutely want to travel, wait until after, say, August the 20th. That's when kids start going back to school. So family travels end. And you can find that's when the airline prices traditionally break internationally.
Are jet fuel prices still really high?
Yes, they're coming down. Just today, odd that you should ask that, the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, which is a part of the Department of Transportation, said that the airlines paid about, U.S. carriers paid about $3 billion more for jet fuel in May than they did in May of 2025. That's almost back to normal. But the airlines are not going to lower prices. I mean, you have to understand this. If people keep traveling in these numbers, airlines will keep charging more. There's no incentive for them to lower prices when people are buying tickets. They only lower prices when they have empty seats to sell. If all the seats sell, why lower your prices?
Yeah. I realize, Joe, that your newsletter is geared to a lot of business travelers who basically don't have a lot of freedom to decide when they're going to travel and where they're going to go. But one of the things that I've always enjoyed doing was visiting countries at an off time. For instance, I love Rome in January, and there's no lines. You know, you can do anything. You can get into almost any restaurant, any tourist stop. And if you're from Chicago, let me tell you, even though that's the middle of winter for Rome, it's like spring in Chicago. I'm not kidding. I mean, I went there and I'm like, well, this isn't cold. And you see all these Italians bundled up in scarves and puffy coats. But if you come from a place where it gets cold, January in Rome is not a bad idea. One place, Joe, I've always wanted to visit, and it always seems like it's always expensive, is Iceland.
Iceland is expensive because there aren't a lot of options once you get there, but it's actually very cheap to fly to, comparatively speaking. But let me double back a little bit. First of all, about the Rome and the scarves. There's something about the Italians. They are convinced that they wear scarves in the summer because they're convinced you'll get cold if you don't cover up your neck. So it's not only a fashion statement, which everything in it for Italians is a fashion statement. It's also the fact that they believe that it's healthier. But also, the reason why you see all those scarves in January in Rome is the Romans hate the cold, but the minute it gets above 50 degrees or like 15 centigrade, they're out there sitting in the outdoor cafes.
Mm-hmm.
Much the same as Paris. The best time to go to Europe is not in the summer, because the Europeans take vacation in the summer. So if you go to London or Paris or Munich or Madrid or Barcelona, who will you meet in August, on the Grand Via in Madrid, looking to get into the Prado? You'll meet people from Streeterville, or Des Moines, because the French are gone. Mm-hmm. They're on vacation somewhere else, maybe Morocco, But as you say, in the off season, January and February especially, yes, it will be colder. Yes, the days are not as long. But hello, you people live in Chicago. I mean, this is the town where in January in Chicago once my leather coat froze. You're telling me you can't handle 45 degrees in January in Paris?
Really. By the way, last time I was in Rome, I stopped in at a little place and bought these 2 scarves, and the woman there like twisted them together and she put them on me and she tied them here and she tied them there. And I looked so sophisticated, and I have never been able to reproduce that once. I don't know. It's like a gift. I don't know. Maybe when you wear scarves all the time, there's something that you learn, because I know what they can look like, and they never look like that when I do them.
Well, I look at it this way. The French are brilliant with the color blue. Okay. South of France is all blue. The Italians make brown stylish.
It was a brown and white scarf. They both were brown, tan, and white.
Listen, the Italians and the French are just really stylish people. Although one of the people who taught me a lot of what I know about travel, a fellow sadly lost before his time, Coleman Lawler, once said, the Italians are as stylish as the French think they are. Now Coleman Lawler was neither French nor Italian. So that was an observation he made. And he loved Paris. He loved Italy. He loved the south of France. But he loved the Italians more because they thought they were effortlessly stylish, whereas the French worked at it.
Wow.
And the Italians are just great at that. And the Brits wear suits better than we do. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Yes, they always look like they got a stick up their butt. But
well, I think that's because one thing that American men don't usually do is get their clothing tailored to their body. I can buy any kind of dress, and if I take it to the dry cleaner where there's a woman who does tailoring and I have it fitted a little bit, man, it looks like it cost $1,000.
Well, my dresses never look that good, so I don't know what to tell you.
But don't you think men in America don't, maybe if you're, buying, a bespoke suit, but for the most part, a guy will buy an off-the-rack suit, even if it's a nice one, in Neiman Marcus or Nordstrom. But then there's, if there's one part that's a little big, whatever.
Well, guys are like that. We also will use anything in a bar, in a bathroom. My wife, I love her, has 3 shelves worth of things in our shower, lotions and potions and this and that. And I got a bar of soap and something that I could squeeze out that passes for shampoo for what's left of my hair. It's just different. Men are lazy, even though we're allegedly manscaping and being more stylish these days. We'll just never catch up because, we'll wear things until they wear out. And that's the way it is.
And beyond.
But the Europeans pay more attention. And certainly beyond. Absolutely. But you try to up your game, dress nicer. The Europeans still dress up a bit for nights out, for example. Not in restaurants anymore, but really cut off jeans and flip-flops, don't cut it in Paris. It makes you as an American.
They don't cut it anywhere, as far as I'm concerned, but then I'm a snob.
And don't bring your White Sox or Cubs hat because, it makes you for an American.
Okay. Joe, thank you so much. I love talking with you. It's always fun. Thanks for being here.
Have a great summer if we don't talk again until after.
Sounds good. You too. That is going to do it for me today. Obviously, driving it home with Patty Vasquez is up next. And of course, Choose Views starts our day at 6 a.m. I will be here tomorrow at 2 p.m. I'm going to give Paul Shivari the day off, so I will be here with the lovely Lady B. And we're going to be talking to Rick Smith, who is always, I know, a big hit. Also want to let you know we're going to do another one of those hours with Greg Hines where we leave the phone lines and the text lines open. We're going to talk about all things Chicago and Illinois. Hope you'll join me then. Have a great evening, my friends, and good night.